Hey guys, welcome to Coaching Through COVID. This is our fourth little episode now. We've had a few little snippets with some coaches from around the Isle of Man to see what they've been getting up to and how they've been connecting with their athletes and their sports. So episode 1, we had Tan and Pritchard. Episode 2, we had Claire Batty. Episode 3, we had Andy Fox from Athletics. And we're back to a little bit of rugby again today. We've got Chris Brannigan. Chris, thanks for coming and talking to us, mate. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trev. Yeah, I'm cool, mate. Trying to top up a bit of tan with the Manx sun.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm good, mate.
excellent. Yeah, I've got the old farmer's tan going on from all the gardening. So neck and arms, and that's about it. So
That's all you
obviously,
need.
how are things going down in rugby at the minute, mate? Obviously, there's been a lot of change with COVID. It's come around probably right in what would have been the height of the rugby season, and caused things to come to a standstill. Uh, what's been going on? Give us a bit of background, would you, mate?
Yeah, it's not been an ideal time for any sport, has it? And I think we need to look at it probably quite positively. It's been at the back end of our season. We've had the lion's share of the season. We've got a feel for the sports who've pretty much kissed goodbye to everything for the year. They're probably in a much tougher position. But yeah, it's been a good opportunity to sort of take a lot of the work back to ground zero and base level and look at what products we've got out there and what we're offering people and how we're connecting with our members and our coaches the best. So yeah, it's been an interesting time, but I think probably a worthwhile time for the sport.
Right, very good. So what sort of positive things have you found come about as a result of lockdown and not being able to do what we would normally do?
All our committee members can now use Zoom.
Hey, that's a big positive
So
for a lot of people at the minute, and
yeah,
me and you probably wouldn't be having this conversation like this if it wasn't for lockdown either.
yeah, I think it's obviously when you step into things like committees across the sports, it can be sometimes quite onerous of your time, can't it? When you're maybe working a full-time job, doing a quick session, making the kids the food, nipping out for a committee meeting, that's half an hour, that ends up being 2 hours, going back home, putting the kids to bed, doing some CPD or just watching Netflix. So yeah, it certainly allowed us to move that meeting format into the 21st century and take a little bit of take a little bit off the shoulders of the people who are on the committee.
Right, super stuff. So are they generally people sort of picking up with the technology quite quickly? I suppose when you have to, you do, don't you?
Yeah. I mentioned Zoom and Teams and such back in January, and I had a couple of um, blank faces stare back at me.
I would have been one
And
of them.
well, they're all pretty good now. So yeah, it's definitely been a positive. I'm not sure everyone's up to a share screen sort of standard yet, but we're going to get there.
Super. So how about coaching, Chris? How are rugby coaches getting on during this time? Have you heard any good stories about how clubs are connecting with their players and coaches accessing CPD? Has there been any sort of movements in rugby circles on that scene?
Yeah, I think we've been really fortunate in rugby with CPD opportunities, and I know sports in general have been sort of inundated with really good information, and it's been so accessible for everyone. Rugby's no different. We've had opportunities to listen to some of the best sort of coaches and people and coach developers in the world from the comfort of our own living rooms, etc. So yeah, that's been cool. I think we need to do a little bit better at passing that information and onto other people. Not everyone is as sad as me and follows geeky Twitter accounts which tell me about obscure webinars at 3:00 in the morning. You know, it's so yeah. Maybe as a sport we need to come together and share that information a little bit better. clubs have been doing some pretty cool stuff. Obviously, 2020, if you don't have WhatsApp, who are you? So there's a lot of WhatsApp groups with coaches, and they've been connecting pretty well and setting some challenges up. And yeah, my challenge to some of the clubs recently has just been how can we almost use the time not just to stay connected and find out what each other are having for dinner, but how can we use the time to really develop each other as coaches and develop our groups as coaches. And that could be working on IDPs, that could be giving feedback, that could be seeking feedback, that could be planning sessions for next season, that could be working on planning and periodizing next season as a whole. So yeah, there's a million things to do. A lot can be coaching groups and a lot can be individual.
Super. There's a lot of things that we can really be working on, isn't it? And sort of hopefully getting ready and right for the future. And I suppose it's also a good opportunity to reflect, isn't it? And look at what we've done in the last sort of 12 months and, how has that gone? Has it been effective? What could we do better? So it's forced that reflective practice onto us, I suppose, in a lot of ways, because we're not able to do any more practice to reflect on.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes a bit we across the board in sport and business, really. Maybe don't always have the opportunity or we don't feel we have the time to do that well, is to reflect on things, because we go back to people in involuntary roles and time commitments being elsewhere. It's not easy for them to always find a number of hours to reflect on sessions and reflect on seasons, and it's not easy for coaching collectives to really give concerted time towards reflection. So yeah, hopefully there's a number of sports and coaches and groups that have been using the time to do that, because if we're not reflecting on it last year, I'm not convinced we're going to be taking our best step forward for next season.
Super. So what have your big take homes been, I suppose, from the last 12 months of local rugby and coaching? What sort of positive things have been taking place prior to lockdown, I suppose?
I think the willingness to change how we're approaching coaching is definitely more apparent now than it has been. So I think there's a lot more open-minded coaches out there who are willing to be a little bit more vulnerable in the delivery and taking and giving feedback. That's been a really positive side to it. I think we've got a lot of coaches in the sport. An area we need to get better at is supporting some of those who aren't as confident as the likes of maybe yourself, let's say. We've got guys who are brand new. We've got mums who are stepping in just to give a set of extra hands. And I think we need to do better at providing an opportunity to upskill them before we throw them into the deep end, which is something I've been working with our clubs on and suggesting to some of our key people at clubs in the last few weeks, is how do we use this time to upskill said mum or dad, so when it comes to September, October, November, it's not a case of I'm willing but uninformed. Well, you'll be informed in half an hour when you've got 20 kids at your feet. Yeah. So how can we gradually develop them as interested and informed coaches now? Something that I don't think we always have the opportunity to do in the season. So an area we definitely need to get better at.
Yeah, I mean, coaching can be a lonely place, as you just alluded to there. You can quite often find yourself in a situation where you have 20, 30 young people sort of dumped at your feet, and it's like, off you go, see you later, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And sometimes, literally, you might have just done a kids first tag or a leadership qualification or an activators qualification, or sometimes not even that, and you're expected to just crack on. And more often than not, if you want to go somewhere or develop in anything, it's always good to develop with other people, isn't it? And sort of have the opportunity to sort of bounce ideas and questions off each other.
Yeah, I think like I say, when you do the course and then you go into maybe a solitary role because, well, Joe Bloggs has now done this course, therefore it's all right, we can leave them to it. I mean, it's like the old saying, when are you most, at risk at driving? Probably when you've just passed your test. So yeah, working with clubs to create, I guess more of a mentoring approach, but that makes it sound extremely official. And I think just generally just a little bit of support. And we've got a couple of clubs particular who are really quite good at that, and they don't throw the coaches in. They throw them into a group of 3 or 4 coaches that can really help them, as you say. But yeah, I just think now's the time to maybe highlight those people for next season, incrementally improve them and get them better in the next 2-3 months by real simple conversations, real simple skill acquisition. So breaking down the skill acquisition of, let's say, a grubber kick in rugby, a pass and a punt, let's say, really breaking down some skill acquisition for some parents who can build a lot of confidence in delivering 3 real easy skills. And the next step would be, how do we take those skills and let's meet up on a Zoom, or let's meet up on a Hangouts and discuss how we might put those into a game scenario, or how we might add in some variability into that learning. So yeah, that's something I'd probably suggest all sports were doing, is using this period to get maybe unqualified, maybe even unwilling coaches to become excited coaches, informed coaches. Because the key thing for me is we've got to have coaches loving it. If the coaches aren't loving it and having a blast on the sessions, eventually the kids won't be either. So I don't want to just throw 20, 30 kids at the coach's feet, because eventually they'll become despondent, they won't enjoy it, and we've got to make sure that they love in the game too.
I suppose you've got a real challenge now as well in trying to keep coaches excited while there's no sort of hands-on coaching taking place. I could be wrong, but I mean, rugby being by its very nature a contact sport might be one of the last sports to come back online, really, with social distancing measures and things like that. How do you see rugby sort of traversing that challenging period?
I think it's exciting, mate. I think if you view things negatively, we're going to get negative outcomes, and let's flip it on its head and say it's going to give us an opportunity to develop a lot more areas of player development and coach development that we perhaps neglect. There's a lot of areas that we can just get so caught up in tackling and rucking, and sometimes we're forgetting general athlete development. Take the rugby out of it, athletic performance and development, and player development, and doing what's right for that person. And the same with coaches. We can get them concentrating on delivery of things that they're so good at that they never actually have to work on areas that maybe they're not so good at. So yeah, we've been working with the clubs on how we change that offer, and I don't think rugby will be at the back of the queue in an offer of play. It might be at the back of the queue in terms of rugby as we know it, tackling 15 aside.
Yeah,
definitely. That's possible, but we'll have an offer out there, and hopefully the offer's exciting, and hopefully the offer is going to really develop coaches and athletes, and that's what I'm asking the clubs to sort of look at now. So a lot of multi-skill sports coaching stuff, and it's a chance for us to be super creative around being exciting.
Yeah, I was really excited to have Tynan do his little video for us in episode 1, and he was going through his little app on the phone with the tactics, with all
loving that, isn't he?
in the scenarios, and great way of getting people talking and engaging with each other, and getting a deeper understanding of perhaps the tactical side of the game, which we might not always pay as much attention to as young developing players. and really becoming a scholar of your sport, I suppose, as well.
I thought it was ace, mate. I thought it was really nice because I think by its very nature, kids grow up watching football. I did. I don't think it's in your inherent nature to grow up always just solely watching rugby. Not every kid watches rugby. I'd argue some of the better players we have on the island, tactically, technically, or certainly tactically, maybe are less proficient because they don't know a lot about the game. They don't watch a lot of rugby. That's something I see quite a lot across, not just the Isle of Man, across England. Is we've just got some really good athletes. They don't actually watch enough rugby to know the game. So I've been, again, working with some people and some coaches and clubs on how they use their individual development plans for players, so their IDPs, around challenging the player or players to improve on the area whilst reflecting on the game tactically and technically. So we've got something called Coach Logic, which I know football use, a lot of American soccer teams use, and rugby use, and that's been made free for a number of months now during lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So been challenging people to go and create videos of areas I think they need to be observing. So if we take let's kicking out of hand, for example. I think one player needs to learn how to kick out of hand better. Then could we challenge that player to go and put a playlist together on one of these free platforms of people who are doing it very well and people who could be doing it better? That way we're not just educating the player on good and bad, but we're getting the player watching more rugby as well. And I think that's sometimes half of the battle. So yeah, aligning some of the stuff like Ty's doing based around tactical boards, aligning that along with free sort of resources around analysis to create reels and highlights and thought-provoking discussions about rugby. We don't often talk and watch about it, or watch it enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's brilliant. I mean, with no matches taking place, we haven't got a shortage of footage of old matches in years gone by that we can look at.
Absolutely, mate.
Tons of stuff out there, isn't there? And for some people, it might be a nice little nostalgia trip, as well as actually looking at the sorts of ins and outs of what good looks like, and perhaps how players might have developed over the years and the decades as well. So, I mean, being an England fan, you're obviously biased, and you probably think Johnny Wilkinson was one of the best number 10s of all time. But how does he compare with someone now in the game 20 years, nearly 20 years after? How does Owen Farrell look against Johnny Wilkinson?
What does the playoff in 20 years look like? And that's the question we need to be asking our kids. We need to be preparing our younger players for a game that they perhaps aren't playing just yet. And we need to be asking them to think about what that might look like. And same with careers, and the same with the game. The game is developed in terms of laws and in terms of fly halves and in terms of coaching so much in the last 5 years that, are we preparing our players and our coaches for the game that exists right now and the game that will exist in the future? I'd love to know what kids think Owen Farrell will look like in 20 years. I don't mean what he'll look like. He'll probably still be a handsome man in 20 years' time, but what the England fly half will look like and how that game will be played by him in 20 years' time. That'd be a real cool conversation to have, I reckon.
So what do you think they're going to look like in 20 years' time, Chris?
I'm going to ask the kids.
Oh, dear. Right, well, thanks very much. We'll bring that to a close there, mate. It was really good to get some insights as to what's been going on in rugby, how you're facing some of the challenges, and how you're trying to keep coaches excited, really. And we'll get this out on the air as quick as we can. And cool. If anyone wants to ask any questions or anything like that about the video, or get a hold of Chris, perhaps maybe we could give you a shout on the Coaching Network on Isle of Man Sport on the Facebook group.
Cool.
In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll have our next guest coming soon. And don't forget to check out the Isle of Man Sport podcast as well, which are available on the Isle of Man Sport website as well. Right, thanks very much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers all. Thanks.